Americans are no longer going out and interacting with each other ever since COVID, and really even going before COVID, but COVID exacerbated the situation. We have all just pretty much become couch potatoes. People aren't going out and meeting each other, starting families. Businesses aren't starting the way they used to be. A lot of people are in a really weird position right now. It's the most un American America has ever felt. For most of my childhood, everybody on TV was just constantly going to the club. Everybody was always at the bars. The shows were centered around either being at a coffee shop or a bar or some sort of a social hub that people would go to, a barber shop even. But we're in an era now where people are afraid to go outside, which I think is a huge part of it. Crime is going wild all over the country, especially in the cities. The Democrats deny it. They want to act like we're just racist people that don't understand reality. But I remember people from the rural parts of Michigan coming to Lansing and enjoying the bar, enjoying a show at the Breslin Center, doing things that were just normal American, normal middle class stuff. If you were to go out to the country where I now live and talk to the majority of the people out here, they're afraid of the city. Maybe not afraid like shaking, but they would rather not go if they can help it. Why put yourself in that position to just be attacked by some homeless dude that's cracked out or tweaking off of meth and just ready to cause chaos? And the reason I'm bringing this all up is there's a new article out which shows that the percentage of Americans who say they drink alcohol hits record low. And I think that this is a huge signifier of where we really are as a country. Alcohol, for the majority of people that, didn't have a bad addiction problem, were it was a social way for everybody to interact. Kind of lowers your inhibitions a little bit. You're not as afraid to go and talk to strangers or interact with people you don't see on a daily basis. And I think that, according to this article, I'm just going to move it over here. Second paragraph. This year, only 54% of Americans said they drink alcohol. Only 54% of Americans are saying they drink alcohol. Now, mind you, this is ranked among people that actually participate in polls. I know I've never participated in a poll. I've always heard jokes about people that do participate in polls, but I do think that they might be more important than I used to give credit for in my early 20s. But let's say that this is accurate and that it really is just over 50% of the country that is still participating in the consumption of alcohol. That means that about half of the country is no longer doing this. And you can see in the way that businesses and restaurants have been closing in mass numbers ever since COVID that it's not correcting. We're just not interacting anymore. And a lot of people aren't just going to drink by themselves because it's kind of a weird feeling. Maybe you'll have a beer by yourself or two beers, but most people don't want to get inebriated or, really turn up unless they're around other people. So, going on, for quite some time, there's been this heavy focus on the effects of drinking or binge drinking. Previous research into moderate drinking found that some alcohol, like red wine, could be good for you. However, the consensus among scientists has evolved according to Dermody, as scientists realized that research showed a pattern of correlation, not causation. For example, people who don't drink could have negative health outcomes because the pre-existing condition, while those who do drink may not have other health problems, she said. After controlling for those factors, scientists now say any amount of alcohol can have negative effects on health, such as increased risk of cancer, depression, and anxiety. Young people in particular seem to take heed to that research. I think that this is inaccurate. I do know that people like Dr. Andrew Huberman going on to Joe Rogan has made a lot of us more health conscious than we used to be. But it's not that we are actually taking the advice of only drinking once a week because he's saying that. I mean, there's probably a number of people that are, but they're extremely health focused and they probably would have been on like the juice cleanse back in the 90s. But what I think this actually is them using correlation to justify causation. Research shows that alcohol is unhealthy. Young people must be reacting to that. I think it's entirely more likely that young people are just not going out. And beyond the fact that everything's so dangerous, we just can't afford it. Even people that are working 60 hours a week, they are making a fraction of what people used to make. It is a struggle to have spending money. People are lucky to be able to pay their bills. They're happy to have their Netflix or whatever, streaming service that they're on. And they just pretty much chill. They're grateful to have food that doesn't taste like crap. So they're just kind of living and existing. I don't think that it's accurate to say that the majority of the people that are no longer drinking are doing it simply because of health reasons. That said, there's some new updates about marijuana, which it does seem like weed is starting to increase in popularity in some areas and decrease in others. I think part of that is the states that are legal, like here in Michigan. I've heard a lot of people say that the new weed makes them feel like they're going schizophrenic, like they're having an extreme anxiety attack that they never would have got from weed before, more comparable to like doing mushrooms or LSD. I think part of that is the regulations that are being put on the weed growers, especially these people that have like multi-hundred acre farms. I think that they're putting pesticides and things on their weed that is substantially affecting the quality of the product, maybe making it stronger, but it's making it so strong that people are actually having the reactions that you would hear about in movies like Reefer Madness back in the early 1900s when they first started the prohibition on weed. But that said, Trump says he'll make a decision on reclassifying marijuana in the coming weeks. Back in 2018, Trump had almost made weed legal. There was a farm bill that got passed, and within the farm bill, there was this provision for THCA, which is essentially a non psychoactive version of weed, but it's only non psychoactive because THCA converts into THC once heat is applied to it. So if you just have a joint that is rolled, assuming that it hasn't been exposed to extreme heat conditions in your car or something, more than likely that weed is not psychoactive. So, for example, and I'm sure many people that have smoked weed at some point in time have done this, especially if you started when you were a bit younger. People sometimes will try to eat their weed because they hear about edibles. And when they don't know, they'll just take raw bud and try to eat it, and they don't feel anything because it doesn't have the heat to bring out the THC. When you cook it, it brings out the THC. So I'm explaining all this because in the Farm Bill, Trump made it so THCA was not a crime. You could take it, you could use it, you could ship it, you could do whatever you needed to with it because it was not psychoactive. Now you had to go through tests to make sure that it was all legit, but Trump has already started a move towards legalizing weed in a big way, and we're approaching a new deadline. The Farm Bill was given an extension so that way it could go through the physical year of 2025. But this fall, it's officially over. And Trump has to do something to either extend it, whether that's just pushing it out another year, or he needs to just flat out legalize it. I am for the decriminalization of weed. I don't know how I feel about legalization. I think that there's a lot of negatives that come from the corporate industry taking control of the product, specifically with the pesticides and things like that. But it's also just, it's a slippery slope towards the pharmaceutical monopoly being even stronger. And with the way that weed has so many applications for things beyond just psychoactive treatment, for example, it could be used to make clothes, steel, Henry Ford used to make his vehicles. It has so much potential upside that putting it into the hands of the most powerful people is just going to make them more powerful. I think that it should be decriminalized. I don't think people should be treated like they're a thug just because they have a joint. And I think the recent video from DC where that police officer just told the guy to put out his joint, that is what we want to see from the police. That reminded me of back in the 60s and 70s before my time, but when a police officer would pull up to somebody that was drinking a beer and they would tell them to pour it out and go home. They didn't ruin their life over it. I think that weed should be treated very similar to that. I also think alcohol should be treated similar to that again. I don't encourage people to be inebriated and super messed up, but I don't like a police state. I don't like the government trying to tell us what we can do. It's it's a slippery slope towards communism. I don't believe that the experts are actually so much more wise that they have the right to tell us anything. So yeah, I just wanted to make a real quick video about this. If you enjoy my content, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on all social media platforms at Brian D Exclusive. I still don't have a Patreon, but if you would like to donate to support the channel, my Cash App is also Brian D Exclusive. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.